At 2:11 a.m. over the Nevada desert, Captain Ethan Cole should have been dead. His fuel was bleeding out faster than his gauges could keep up. A storm cell had swallowed his small cargo plane whole, and the nearest airport was still 90 miles away. On his radar, the screen was empty. No runways, no beacons, no hope. Then he saw it. Through a break in the clouds, a strip of light cut through the black. At first, he thought it was a reflection, some trick of lightning on sand. But as he dropped lower, the shape sharpened. A perfect, straight runway in the middle of nowhere, glowing like molten metal, every inch of it shimmering gold. No tower, no radio, no call sign, just a silent invitation. Land here, now. Asterisk, asterisk. His training screamed not to trust what he was seeing. His survival instinct said he didn't have a choice. Ethan put the nose down and prayed the gold was real enough to hold his wheels. The next morning, when investigators went looking for the runway that had saved his life, they found only empty desert. No asphalt, no markings, no lights, just a faint dusting of metal flakes in the sand. And one question no one in Washington could answer: who built a runway of gold that disappears before sunrise? And why did they let him land on it? By the time the first alarm went off, Ethan Cole had already been in the air for 8 hours. He flew the kind of routes most people never thought about. Overnight cargo runs. Ghost flights, carrying everything from medical supplies to mystery crates stamped with company names he'd never heard of. No passengers. No applause on landing. Just a signature on a clipboard and another long stretch of dark sky. That night, he was flying a twin-engine turboprop out of Denver, bound for Fresno with a stopover in Las Vegas for a refuel and a quick paperwork shuffle. It was supposed to be easy. Clear skies, light tailwind, the kind of route you could fly half asleep. But the weather radar had lied. An unforecast storm cell had grown over the Nevada desert like a bruise, expanding and darkening just as he crossed into its airspace. One moment, the sky was clear. Next, his windshield was a wall of rain and lightning. November 849er Tango, we're showing some returns building in your sector. The Vegas controller said, calm and casual. We recommend you deviate 10 degrees south. Ethan stared at his own radar. The storm wasn't something to go around. It was something to survive. Vegas Center, 849er Tango, he said, keeping his voice steady. We're already in it. Lightning spidered across the clouds. The plane shuddered. Then the fuel warning chimed. He looked down. His right tank, which should have had another hour's worth of fuel, was dropping faster than it should. Not emptying. Bleeding. Come on, he muttered. Tapping the gauge like that would help. Didn't. The left tank started dropping too, slower but steady. Vegas Center came back. 849er Tango, say fuel. He did the math in his head. It wasn't pretty. Vegas, we're tight, he said. Request direct vectors. Minimum to field. There was a pause he didn't like. 849er Tango, we can get you to McCarran in about 90 miles, the controller said. You're going to be close. Translation, we're not sure you'll make it. Any other strips between my position and you? Ethan asked. Private. Military. I'll take a dirt road with lights at this point. Another pause. Negative, the controller said. Nothing we show on scope. You're in the middle of nowhere, Captain. In the cockpit, alone with the storm and the alarms, Ethan did what pilots in trouble always do. He got quiet. He narrowed his focus. He trimmed, adjusted, and managed power. He watched the needle sink toward red. He stared into the featureless black beyond his nose and thought, briefly, of his sister in Phoenix and the message he hadn't returned yet. Of the voicemail from his father he'd deleted without listening. Of all the unfinished, uncomplicated human things he'd assumed he had more time for. The plane lurched. The right engine coughed. Then, through the storm, he saw it. At first, it was just a glow, faint and wrong, like someone had lit a fire underground. Then the cloud cover thinned for a heartbeat, and he caught a clearer glimpse. A long, straight strip of light, brighter at the edges, shimmering like liquid under invisible lamps. Vegas Center, he said. leaning forward, heart kicking. I've got what looks like a runway at my 1 o'clock, about 8 miles. Static crackled. -849er Tango. There are no runways in that sector. I'm looking right at it, he said. Runway lights, centerline, the whole thing. Nothing on the map, Captain, the controller insisted. No registered airport, no private strip. We're not painting anything on radar. You may be seeing ground lights. Ground lights didn't line up in perfect parallel lines. Ground lights didn't throw shadows like that. He dropped the nose a little more. The strip grew larger, brighter. That was when he realized what was wrong with it. Runways were white or yellow or dull gray. This one was gold. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. Light slid over it like sunlight on coins at the bottom of a fountain, each panel or tile catching and throwing it in a different direction. It looked solid, it looked straight, and it looked like the only option he had left. Vegas, he said, voice low. I'm diverting. Diverting to where? The controller demanded. Ethan watched the golden strip rise to meet him through the rain. I'll let you know, he said. He cut the connection, flipped on his landing lights, and pointed thousands of pounds of metal and fuel at a runway the FAA insisted didn't exist. At 500 feet, the storm finally broke. The clouds fell away in shredded layers, and the desert opened beneath him like a map. He expected to see scrub brush, rocks, maybe a lonely farm road. Instead, the gold blazed up at him. The runway was carved into a flat expanse of nowhere, a perfect strip at least 7,000 feet long, marked by bright, steady-edge lights that glowed a warm amber. No approach lights, no Poppy or Vassy to guide his glide slope. Just that impossible gleam, straight and unwavering. Okay, he whispered to himself. Okay, we're really doing this. His training ran like a second track in his brain. Stabilize, check gear, confirm flaps, don't chase the needles. The altimeter unwound. For 100 feet. 3. His landing lights swept the strip, and for the first time he saw the surface itself. It wasn't asphalt. It wasn't concrete. It looked like panels of rectangular tiles laid end to end, thousands of them, each a muted metal gold. Not shiny like jewelry, matte, industrial, the kind of gold color you'd see on a bar locked in a vault, not on something designed to be scraped by airplane tires. This is insane, he muttered. But the insane thing was still better than the alternative, which was falling out of the sky into a hard desert. He lined up, lowered the gear, and committed. At 100 feet, his instruments flickered. The altimeter jumped, then froze. The GPS flashed an O signal. His radios went dead. For a terrifying breath, the cockpit went completely silent. Engine noise, no hiss of air, no hum of electronics if someone had hit mute on reality. Then the sound slammed back in. Engines roared. Wind buffeted. Tires squealed. He was down. The plane thudded onto the golden surface, bounced once, then bit in. The rollout felt smoother than any runway he'd ever landed on, like gliding over thick glass. He braked carefully, unsure how much grip this impossible surface would give him. The plane slowed. The runway lights marched past on either side, dutiful and bright. At last, at what he judged to be about halfway down, Ethan eased the throttle back and let the aircraft settle to a stop. His hands shook. He sat there for a moment, breathing hard, the smell of hot metal filling the cockpit. Vegas Center, 849er Tango, he said, flipping the mic again out of sheer habit. I'm on the ground. I've landed on an unmarked strip. Coordinates. He rattled off his best estimate based on the last known position. The radio hissed. No reply. He tried the emergency frequency. Nothing. The storm still snarled on the horizon. But overhead the sky was clear and star-punched, like nothing had ever been wrong. He shut the engines down. Silence rushed in. For the first time, he could hear the tiny, crisp sounds of his airplane cooling. Metal pinging, the soft hiss of systems winding down. And underneath it all, a faint, low hum, not from the plane, from the runway. Ethan unstrapped, grabbed his flashlight, and opened the cockpit door. The desert air hit him dry and strangely warm. The smell was all dust and something metallic, like a handful of pennies had been baked in an oven. He climbed down the ladder, boots hitting the golden surface with a muted clang. Up close, the runway was even stranger. Each panel was about 3 feet wide and 6 feet long, fitted together so tightly he couldn't slip a fingernail between them. They weren't painted gold. They were gold. A darker, alloyed version, maybe, but unmistakable. Light from the edge markers washed over them, soft and rich, like honey over metal. He crouched and ran his fingers along the seam. Cool. Solid. He rapped his knuckles against it. Sounded dense. "Where the hell am I?" he whispered. He turned in a slow circle. No hangars. No control tower. No fuel truck. No buildings of any kind. Just the runway and, beyond its edges, endless, flat desert rolling away into blackness. The edge lights didn't look like anything he'd seen at a certified airport. They were low metal domes, flush with the surface, each emitting a steady, warm glow with no visible bulb. He followed them toward what should have been the approach end, counting paces. The hum grew louder near the threshold, a vibration he could feel in his teeth. There, just off the side, a small, unmarked concrete box sat half buried in the sand, the size of a chest freezer, featureless except for a single metal door with a keyhole and a faded yellow triangle painted above it. Radiation. Absolutely not, he muttered. He was a pilot, not a bomb tech. He took a step back. That was when he saw movement. Far down the strip at the opposite end, a figure stood in the glow of the unseen light's dark silhouette against the gold, perfectly still. Ethan's throat closed. "Hello?" he called, voice cracking a little. No answer. The figure didn't move. He lifted his flashlight, angling the beam along the runway. The light reached the far end and died, swallowed by the distance. The silhouette remained, watching. A chill crawled across his scalp. He took one step toward it. The runway lights flickered. For half a second, everything went dark. When they came back on, the figure was gone. The hum cut off like someone had yanked a cord. The edge lights dimmed, shifting from rich gold to flat, ordinary white. Ethan's flashlight sputtered back to full brightness. His radio cracked and hissed. "Our last transmission? Say again, 849er Tango? Are you declaring an emergency?" Vegas Center. Loud and clear. Ethan swallowed. He looked down. The surface beneath his boots was no longer gold. It was plain, dull concrete, cracked in places, worn like it had been there for decades and forgotten just as long. He turned in a slow circle again. The desert around him felt different, colder, older. The hum was gone. The concrete box was still there, but the runway of gold had vanished as if it had never been there at all. By the time Ethan limped into McCarran 3 hours later, running on fumes and adrenaline, the sun was starting to pale the eastern sky. Ground crew met him on the taxiway, waving with unusual urgency. He shut down the engines, popped the door, and was halfway down the ladder when 2 men in reflective vests and suits flagged him over. "Captain Cole?" the taller one asked. He nodded, muscles aching. "Come with us," the man said. "Your company's been notified. The FAA wants a word." In the small, fluorescent interrogation room they parked him in, the coffee was stale and the air conditioning too aggressive. A wall clock ticked loud enough to drive nails into his skull. Across from him sat Allison Park, an FAA investigator with dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense knot, and a man who didn't bother to give his name. Suit, tie, flash of a badge too fast to read. "Captain Cole," Allison said, opening a folder. "You reported an emergency diversion approximately 90 miles east of here at 0232 locals. You claim to have landed on an unregistered runway. Is that correct?" He nodded. "You have my last position on radar. I gave coordinates." She slid a printout across the table. "And yet," she said, "according to our logs, your transponder showed no descent. Just a straight line through the storm, slight deviation south, then a return to course at a lower speed." He frowned. "That's not possible," he said. I was on the ground for at least 20 minutes. I shut down engines. You exited the aircraft? The man in the suit asked sharply. Yes, Ethan said. Walked the surface. It was different. How different? Allison asked. He hesitated. He could say, I thought it was some kind of military strip. He could say, it was lit unlike anything I've seen. Instead, exhausted and still unnerved by the memory of that hum and that figure, he told the truth. It was gold, he said. The whole runway, not painted, built from gold-colored panels or metal. It glowed. There was a vibration. And then it just wasn't. When my radios came back and I could raise Vegas, it looked like an old concrete strip. No gold, no glow. Like it flipped between two versions. The room went very quiet. Allison watched him, expression unreadable. The suit leaned in. Do you use any medications, Captain? Prescription or otherwise? I'm not hallucinating, Ethan snapped. Check my blood. I'll pee in a cup. Whatever you want. I know what I saw. Your onboard cameras show no visual anomaly, Allison said calmly. Your cockpit voice recorder has your transmissions, your breathing, some cursing, but nothing about gold. Our radar shows you losing altitude, yes, but never touchdown. You were below coverage for about 7 minutes. When you reappeared, you were back on a shallow descent for Vegas. 7 minutes? He repeated. She nodded. How long did you think you were on the ground? The suit asked. At least 20, Ethan said. Maybe more. Allison scribbled something on her pad. Time perception can be skewed under stress, she said. Hypoxia. I wasn't hypoxic, he said. I've had hypoxia training. This wasn't that. The instruments died. Radios cut out. I was standing on that runway. I touched it. I could feel it. Captain, the suit said slowly, you understand that reporting unusual observations has implications for your medical, your certifications, your fitness to fly. You're asking me to lie, Ethan said. I'm asking if you're sure you want this on the record in exactly those words, the suit replied. Allison's expression softened just a fraction. Look, she said, nobody's saying you didn't have a rough night. You rode a cell you shouldn't have, your fuel management got dicey, and you came out the other side with a story that doesn't line up with the data. We're just trying to figure out if there's a system issue, a mapping error, or a pilot who finally lost it. He finished for her. Silence again. Off the record, she said quietly. Is there any chance you napped on autopilot and dreamed some of this? He stared at her. Is there any chance, he shot back, that your maps are missing something you don't want on them? The suit's eyes flickered. Allison closed the folder. For now, she said, we're opening this as an incident, not an accident. Your license is provisionally clear, pending a medical. Get some sleep. Don't leave town. The suit stood. You'll hear from us again soon, Captain, he said. And if anyone else asks what you saw out there, I recommend you say as little as possible. Why? Ethan asked. The man smiled without warmth. Because if you're right, he said, you landed on something no one's supposed to find. And if you're wrong, you don't want to be the guy talking about runways made of gold on a mandatory psych eval. They left him alone with his cooling coffee and the tick of the clock, the image of the golden strip burning behind his eyelids every time he blinked. In another building across town, a different conversation was happening that Ethan wasn't invited to. On a secure line, a satellite technician pointed at a thermal image of the Nevada desert. Right there, she said, at 0234, we have a heat signature, long, linear, bright, like a lit runway. The analyst frowned. And at 0241, the technician clicked to the next frame. The desert was cold, empty, gone, she said, completely. The analyst wrote one word on his notepad. Reactivate. He circled it, then picked up the phone. Ethan didn't sleep that day. He lay in his hotel room with the blackout curtains drawn and his eyes wide open, replaying every second between the first glimpse of gold and the reboot of his radios. By late afternoon, his phone buzzed. Unknown number, DC area code. He almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, he answered, "This is Cole. Captain Cole," a woman's voice said. "My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm with the Department of Homeland Security." He sat up. "Am I in trouble?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "We'd like to talk. In person. Tonight, if possible. There's a facility near the airport." "You people ever just do coffee?" he muttered. She ignored that. "You'll be compensated for your time," she said. "And this will be off the FAA record. I've read your statement. I think there's more you didn't say in that room." He thought of the figure at the end of the runway. "Yeah," he said quietly. "There is." 2 hours later, he sat in another windowless room. This one nicer, with better coffee and a big flat-screen monitor mounted on the wall. Rachel Monroe looked like an analyst who'd been promoted to the field because she punched above her pay grade. Late 30s, sharp eyes, sleeves rolled up, ID badge clipped to her belt instead of her lapel. On the screen behind her, a satellite image of the Nevada desert was frozen mid-frame. "This is your track," she said, tapping a laser pointer at a tiny blip. "Here's where you go under our radar coverage. 7 minutes later, you reappear here." She clicked. The frame shifted. "And this," she said, "is what one of our birds picked up during that gap." The image zoomed in. Even in blurry false color, Ethan recognized the shape. A long, straight strip of brighter pixels in the middle of nowhere. "Heat signature consistent with runway lights," Rachel said. "Except there's no runway there. On any chart, civilian, military, black or otherwise. We've looked." He exhaled. "So I'm not crazy," he said. "I didn't say that," she replied dryly. "But you're not the first." She clicked again. A new image. Different timestamp. Different year. Same desert. Same impossible strip of brightness. 4 years ago, a private pilot out of Flagstaff reported seeing strange lights on a night flight, Rachel said. Same sector. Claimed he saw what looked like, and I quote, "a runway paved in gold." Declared an emergency, then recovered, decided not to file. His girlfriend talked him out of it. "We only know because he bragged about it in a flying forum under a burner handle. We monitor those." Ethan stared. "Why would anyone build a whatever that is out there?" he asked. "Smuggling, maybe," she said. "Staging area, or something more experimental. There are people with a lot of money and a lot of incentive to keep certain shipments off the books." "Gold shipments," he said slowly. Rachel nodded at the screen. "Imagine," she said, "you're moving illegal bullion, or gold, laundered reserves. You don't want to go through any legitimate facility. You build your own strip, but you don't pave it with asphalt. You pave it with the product. Layered bars covered in a composite skin, disguised as concrete or dirt until you flip a switch. You're saying the runway itself is storage," he said. "Safe," she said. "Hidden. Hard to steal without a very long truck. And if anyone stumbles onto it, you cut power, change the surface appearance, jam their instruments, tell the world they were tired and hallucinating. Except you have a satellite photo," Ethan said. "Several," she said. "Every time it lights up, we get a flash. It's intermittent, maybe 1 or 2 nights a year. Always in bad weather. Always when the radar is noisy." They locked eyes. "You landed on something very few people have ever seen," she said. "The question is whether that was an accident or an invitation." A chill slid down his spine. "I was almost out of fuel," he said. "If they hadn't turned those lights on, I'd be a crater in the desert." "Which makes them either good Samaritans with a very strange business model," Rachel said, "or very pragmatic. Maybe they'd rather you land and leave than drop flaming metal onto their investment." "And the figure?" he asked, before he could stop himself. Her eyes sharpened. "What figure?" He told her. Her jaw tightened. "We didn't pick up any additional heat signatures," she said. "No vehicles, no other aircraft, no humans on the ground. Just the strip. But that doesn't mean no one was there." She clicked off the screen. "We want to find the strip," she said, "while it's cold. See what it looks like when they're not showing off." Normally, we'd send a drone, but they've jammed us before. We need someone who's actually been there to point at the right patch of sand. You want me to go back, he said. Not to land, she said. To ride along. Recon only. Helicopter, high-altitude optics. You just say there, and we mark it. He thought of the note in Allison's eyes when she'd asked him, off the record, if he really wanted this on file. He thought of the hum in his bones and the way the gold had disappeared like it had never been. Why me? He asked. Because you're obsessed already, something in him answered. Because they know you can't stop thinking about it. Because you survived it, Rachel said simply. And because whoever built that thing might be very interested in the man who landed on their runway of gold and walked away. She slid a form across the table. Or you can say no, she added. Go back to your cargo runs. Tell yourself it was a weird night. Let this turn into someone else's problem. He looked at the paper, then at her. And if I say yes? He asked. She smiled, but her eyes stayed serious. Then we get on a chopper at dawn, she said, and see what kind of people hide their fortune under a runway. The helicopter thumped through the pre-dawn air like a heartbeat. Ethan sat strapped in by the window, headset on, watching the Nevada desert roll beneath them in shades of gray and rust. Next to him, Rachel Monroe studied a tablet wired into the chopper's sensor pod. In the front seats, the pilot and co-pilot spoke in clipped, calm tones, as if this were just another training run. It didn't feel like a training run. Coming up on your last known position, the pilot said. 2 minutes. Ethan pressed closer to the glass. From up here, the desert looked harmless. Dry washes, low ridges, scabbed rock. No golden strip. No hum in his teeth. Rachel angled the tablet toward him. A map overlay showed their track and a blinking circle. This is where your transponder dropped, she said. If that thing is anchored to anything permanent, we're about to fly over it. The helicopter banked. Ethan's stomach did a slow, uneasy roll. There, he said suddenly, pointing. That ridge line. I recognize that split. And that dry lake bed. We're close. Eyes on the ground, Rachel told the pilot. Slow it down. The thrum of the rotors deepened as they dropped lower. Sand blurred into scrub and stone. Ethan squinted. First, he saw nothing. Then his mind snapped something into place. Stop, he said. Right there. Hover. Below them, half swallowed by sand and time, was the faint outline of a runway. Not gold, not glowing, just a faded strip of concrete, scarred and cracked, its centerline barely visible. No lights, no tower, no hangars. A ghost of an airfield no one had bothered to chart. Old military auxiliary field, the pilot said. Looks abandoned for decades. Rachel shook her head. Thermal? She asked the co-pilot. He checked his screen. Cold as everything else, he said. No power, no heat leak. Zoom optics, Rachel ordered. A motor whined as the sensor pod turned. On the cabin monitor, the field leapt into sharp focus. The surface was rough and dusty, but something about it made Ethan's scalp tighten. Look at the panels, he said. They're not poured slabs. They're laid, segmented. Same dimensions as what I walked on, just aged out, or disguised. Rachel studied the image. Mark these coordinates, she said. We'll put a team on the ground. Ethan frowned. You're not landing us? He asked. Not yet, she said. If the people who own this strip are watching, a helicopter on top of their vault is a great way to get shot down. We play dumb from the air, then walk in slow. He looked down again. For a split-second brief, he didn't trust a thought he saw a shimmer along the center line. Like heat mirage, like light skimming over metal. Then the chopper banked, and it was gone. Did you see that? He asked. Rachel didn't turn. Question is, she said quietly, did they see us? The ground team rolled in at noon. 2 unmarked SUVs. A box truck with a fabricated utility logo. A 5-person crew in workwear that could pass for surveyors if anyone drove close enough to care. No one did. Ethan stood at the edge of the old runway with Rachel, wearing borrowed sunglasses and a ball cap. The desert heat pressed down, turning the concrete into a griddle. Up close, the strip looked even more unremarkable than from the air. Faded paint, patches of gravel, stubborn weeds are creeping through cracks. "This is not what I landed on," he said. Rachel nodded toward the truck. "Maybe it is," she said, "just dressed differently." From the back of the truck, a technician pulled out what looked like a lawnmower on steroids. Ground-penetrating radar started walking a slow grid over the surface. Another tech drilled a narrow core near the threshold, vacuuming out dust and debris into a labeled tube. "Depth 3 inches, he called. "Composite slab, non-standard, feels denser than concrete. Scan says we've got a reflective layer about a foot down," the GPR operator said, squinting at his display. "Continuous, metallic, high density, runs the whole length. Could be old reinforcement," one of the others suggested. The operator shook his head. "Rebar doesn't read like this," he said. "This is solid." The core tech handed Rachel a tablet. She tapped, bringing up a rough density estimate. "If this entire platform is laid over bullion," she said quietly, "we're standing on enough gold to shift a small country's economy." Ethan looked down. The runway suddenly felt less like forgotten infrastructure and more like the lid of a vault. "What about the electronics?" Rachel asked. "Any embedded wiring?" The tech nodded. "Conduits every 6 feet. They're dead now, but something used to run through here. Power, data, both." Rachel pointed to the cracked concrete box Ethan remembered near the threshold. Up close, its radiation symbol was almost gone, bleached by years of sun. "Open it," she said. The tech hesitated. "We didn't bring a bomb squad," he said. "We brought you," she replied. "Suit up. If it looks wrong, you close it and we pretend we were never here." Minutes later, in a light protective shell, he knelt and gently worked an expanding key into the corroded lock. The door creaked open. No green glow, no dramatic hiss, just a dark, metal cavity with bundles of thick, insulated cables and what looked like a power distribution unit the size of a small suitcase. "Old but not ancient," the tech said. "This thing's maybe 10, 15 years out of manufacture. Somebody maintained it for a while. They just haven't fed it in a bit." Rachel leaned in. A small plate on the unit bore a serial number and a manufacturer's name partially scraped off. The last letters remained. "Corp Energies AG." "Swiss shell," Rachel muttered. "Figures." Ethan felt the hairs on his arms lift. "Do you hear that?" he asked. The tech paused. "Hear what?" "A hum," Ethan said. "Faint, like it's asleep, not dead." Rachel watched him. "There's no power to this field," the tech said. "No voltage on these lines. If something's humming, it's not coming from here." Ethan knelt and put his palm flat on the runway. Warm, still, but in the silence of his own body, somewhere behind his heartbeat, he thought he could feel it, like distant machinery, like a transformer, idle but ready. "Whatever this is," Rachel said, closing the box, "it's not abandoned. It's waiting, and whoever owns it has deep pockets, offshore companies, and a habit of turning physics into security." She stood. "Pack it up," she told the team. "We're not ripping anything yet. Next step is figuring out who thinks they own this stretch of desert and how mad they get when they learn a stranger landed on their gold." The answer came 2 days later, in the form of 3 black SUVs kicking dust across the horizon. They arrived at sunset, right as the field team was packing up. Officially, the operation was covert. Unofficially, nothing in an open desert stays secret for long. From the ridge, Ethan watched the vehicle stop at the end of the strip. 7 men stepped out. No uniforms, no insignia. Expensive sunglasses, desert boots, earpieces. Not cartel. Not obviously U.S. military. The center man walked like he was used to other people getting out of his way. "Private security," Rachel said beside him, throat tight. "Contractors, at least. Maybe something worse." "Think they know we were here?" Ethan asked. As if in answer, the man at the center knelt and ran his hand over one of the fresh core plugs. He stood slowly, turned, and looked directly toward the ridge. They were almost half a mile away. He shouldn't have been able to see them, and yet, Ethan felt the weight of his gaze. "Yeah," Rachel said. "I think they know." An hour later, back at the safe house, Rachel slammed a folder down in front of him. "This was supposed to be a slow, quiet investigation," she said. "Follow the money, build the case, roll in with warrants and allies. Instead, we have a pilot who landed on somebody's Dragon Horde and a Swiss-linked energy fund that's sending mercs to check their locks." "You're saying this is my fault," Ethan said. "I'm saying you're the reason we're on the clock," she replied. She clicked a remote. On the TV screen, a photo appeared. The man from the SUV minus sunglasses in an old corporate headshot. Clean shaven, tired eyes. "Name's Victor Hallberg," Rachel said. "Former defense consultant. Spent a decade advising regimes no one wants to talk about in public. Shows up in the Panama Papers as a beneficiary on 3 shell companies tied to commodities trades that don't exist on any exchange." She clicked again. A map appeared, dotted with small red points. "More interestingly," she said, "satellite retroanalyses show similar transient signature shot bursts of linear heat here, here, and here. Australia, Eastern Europe, West Africa, all tied to areas where Hallberg's people were operating. All in places with murky gold flows and weak oversight. So, this isn't the only runway," Ethan said. "No," she said. "It's one of several. Mobile vaults. Pop them up, activate the field, move metal in and out under the cover of bad weather, and jam it. To the outside world, it's just another storm glitch." Ethan rubbed his eyes. "And landing on one of these gets you what?" he asked. "In your case," she said, "maybe dead. Unless they were expecting someone," he finished. Rachel nodded slowly. "What if they misread your transponder?" she asked. "What if they thought your distress call was theirs? A scheduled flight, a trusted tail number. They light up the strip, you drop in, they realize the mistake, and switch you back to concrete, wipe your instruments, hope you chalk it up to stress. Then why didn't they kill me on the ground?" he asked. Rachel's eyes darkened. "Maybe they weren't there," she said. "Maybe it was automated. Or maybe," she added, "they don't kill on their own doorstep. They wait. Watch. See who you talk to. Who comes looking. That's how you find leaks." He thought of the figure he'd seen at the end of the runway. "You think Hallberg was watching me," he said. "I think he is now," she replied. "Which is why we can't just sit on this strip and hope he folds. He's going to move that gold. Change the system. Maybe burn this site and light up another." She took a breath. "We need him to turn it on again," she said. "On our schedule, not his." Ethan already knew what came next. "You want bait," he said. Rachel didn't deny it. "We use a controlled aircraft," she said. "We broadcast the right kind of distress. We mimic a shipment profile Hallberg cares about. We force him to spin up the Runway of Gold. And when he does, we catch him in the act." She met his eyes. "And we need a pilot who's already landed there once." The plane they gave him this time was a sleek and unfamiliar modified business jet with more antennas than seats. "Call sign Sierra 7-1, the mission lead said during the briefing. "To them, you're a courier bird moving a priority payload that just happened to run into trouble over their patch of desert." "What's my trouble?" Ethan asked. "Fuel imbalance, navigation glitch, escalating electrical issues," the lead said. "Enough noise to explain why you turned off your transponder, squawking their prearranged code, and started begging for anything with a lit runway." Rachel pointed to a diagram on the screen. "Once you're in the box," she said, "we'll inject a coded burst on their frequency that only their system should recognize. We hope that they light up the field, pulse whatever power they've buried under that slab, and we record everything. Comms, heat, the works. And if they don't?" Ethan asked. "Then you go back to Vegas, we regroup, and you get to live with the fact that you scared billionaires for nothing," she said. "I can think of worse outcomes." "And if they do?" he said. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The schedule was tight. At 1:40, he taxied out, cleared by a controller who had no idea the true nature of the flight. At 2:05, he climbed into the same blackness, over the same desert, the ghost of the storm from that first night now just a memory. Altitude 13,000, the mission tech said in his headset from the jump seat. Profile looks good. RFI beacons green. We're emitting on their last known band. Ethan scanned the instruments. Everything gleamed and behaved. Hard to fake being sick when you feel this healthy, he muttered. At 0230, we start the show, the tech said. You'll get a cascade of faults from our side. Try to sound scared without sounding stupid. Story of my life, Ethan said. Right on cue, the first warning chimed. Fuel imbalance. Then bus voltage LOW. Then IRS alignment error. Vegas Center. This is Sierra 7-1, he said, letting tension creep into his voice. We're experiencing multiple system anomalies. Request vectors to the nearest suitable field. We may not make primary. Copy, Sierra 7-1, the controller said. Stand by. He wouldn't be the one who answered next. On a parallel, encrypted channel, the DHS team pushed out a tight, high-frequency burst encoded Mayday key to Hallberg's network. Ethan waited. Out of the cockpit windows, the desert slept on. Then, slowly, the instruments began to fuzz. The heading tape jittered. The artificial horizon wobbled as if drunk. Sierra 7-1, the controller said, now sounding faint. Say. Static swallowed the rest. The mission tech looked up sharply. We're getting jamming, he said. Source vector, right where we want it. West by southwest. Ethan's skin prickled. A glow appeared on the horizon. Not lightning, not city light. A straight, unwavering band of gold. His throat went dry. Target strip lighting up, the tech said, voice tight. Thermal spike detected. Rachel, you getting this? In his ear, Rachel's voice came calm and focused. Copy, Sierra 7-1, she said. We see it. Maintain profile. Do not land unless I say. Repeat, do not land. The hum started as a pressure behind his ears. The GPS flashed an O signal. The radios fell silent. The runway of gold blossomed beneath him, bright and impossible, like it had been waiting. Feels familiar, doesn't it? The tech whispered. Ethan's hands tightened on the yoke. Yeah, he said softly. That's the problem. On the desert floor, everything moved fast. While Ethan flew his approach, circling just outside the beam of gold, a convoy of unmarked vehicles rolled into pre-planned positions beyond the ridge line. Drones, launched earlier, drifted on the edges of the jamming field, watching in infrared. At the strip's midpoint, shapes emerged in the golden glow tracks, loaders, and containers lifted from underground elevators that hadn't shown in daytime scans. Men in work gear moved with practiced efficiency. Oh my God, Rachel breathed in the command truck, eyes glued to a bank of monitors. They're loading bars. That's not hypothetical. That's the real thing. Thermal cameras painted the scene in white-hot silhouettes. Rectangular bricks passed from vault to pallet, pallet to cargo bay, gold disguised by tarp and haste. Signal triangulation is solid, a tech said. We've got their control channel pinned. Rachel picked up a mic. This is it, she said. Execute. On a frequency just outside the smuggler's band, DHS lit up a prearranged key. Miles away, a military aircraft on a training sortie altered course in a way no one on the strip would see until it was too late. Back in the cockpit of Sierra 7-1, Ethan watched the runway below pulse brighter. They want me to land, he realized. Not because they think I'm theirs, because I'm a test, a blip to be studied, a variable to be controlled. He banked away, keeping just inside the field's edge. On his HUD, 3 new contacts appeared as friendly tags on a classified overlay. Fast movers, coming in low. Rachel, he said, voice tight. Your cavalry's here. On the ground, gunfire crackled before the smugglers even understood where it was coming from. One of their trucks exploded, its heat signature blooming sickly on the monitors. Someone on the strip panicked. The runway lights flared white, then gold, then began to strobe. Ethan felt the hum spike. His instruments jittered, then went blank. For a heartbeat, the world went gray. Then he saw it. Far down the strip, framed in the shimmering gold, a lone figure stood with arms raised, as if trying to push the air itself back into place. Not Hallberg, shorter, thinner, older. When the strobing synced just right, Ethan caught a flash of his face. He'd never seen the man before, and yet, with the hair on his neck standing, he knew. The man who'd designed this field, who'd figured out how to hide fortunes in plain sight, who now stood between a collapsing operation and the weight of a government finally paying attention. The hum peaked. On the ground, Rachel's voice snapped. "We're losing telemetry. Tell your pilot to..." Her words warped, slowed, then sped up, like someone was dragging a finger across a recording. Ethan's heart hammered. If this field can scramble radar and GPS, he thought, what else can it touch? His teeth rattled. His vision tunneled. For one wild second, he felt like he was sliding along a surface not entirely there. Then, as quickly as it surged, the hum cut out. The gold died. The runway was just concrete again. On the monitors, the thermal images steadied. Trucks burned. Men lay prone, some surrendered, some not moving. The elevators were exposed, now black mouths in the runway, ringed in twisted metal. The lone figure had vanished. "Field collapse," a tech said hoarsely. "Their system is overloaded. They must have tried to flip some kind of failsafe and shorted it." Rachel didn't answer. Her eyes were on one corner feed, a zoom on the concrete box near the threshold. Its door hung open now, sagging by the heat. Inside, the power unit was melted into a glassy lump. Whatever had hummed beneath Ethan's boots was gone. Target site secured. A voice crackled over encrypted comms. "We have survivors, burned equipment, and... yeah, we've got gold." "How much?" someone asked. "Enough to make this very classified," came the reply. High above, Ethan finally heard his radios again. "Sierra 7-1, this is Vegas Center," the controller said, blissfully unaware of the war that had just flickered beneath his scope. "You went off our screens for a bit there. Say status." He looked down at the dull, wounded strip. "I'm fine," he said. "Just some turbulence." He banked away as ground units rolled onto the runway that had once been gold, floodlights replacing the impossible glow. For the first time since that night, he felt like he was really leaving it behind. The official story never mentioned gold. In the weeks that followed, the public heard a muted version. International smuggling operation disrupted, sensitive infrastructure compromised, details sealed pending ongoing investigation. No names, no mention of runways that appeared only in storms. Ethan sat through more debriefs, more medicals, more interviews with people who smiled like they were on his side but never quite answered his questions. In one such room, Rachel slid a photo across the table. It showed rows of bars in a secure facility, each stamped, each logged. "Recovered assets," she said. "Some of this was stolen. Some of it was meant to fund things we don't put in press releases. Either way, it's not sitting under a fake airstrip anymore." "And Hallberg?" Ethan asked. "Gone," she said. "Vanished before we could grab him. But his network took a hit. Without his system, moving that kind of bulk in the shadows just got a lot harder." He touched the edge of the photo. "People are going to go looking for him," he said. "People already are," she replied. "Some of them wear our badges. Some don't." He hesitated. "That figure on the strip," he said. "The one I saw before the collapse." Rachel's jaw tightened. "Tex pulled some partials from the drone feeds," she said. "He's ex-program, a physicist who disappeared from a European lab about a decade ago. Last known connection was Hallberg. Did he die out there?" Ethan asked. Rachel looked away. "His body wasn't recovered," she said. "Take from that what you will." He knew what that meant. Either the man had been vaporized in his own failing system, or he had walked back into some other hole in reality none of their satellites could see. Rachel stood. "You can go back to flying," she said. "Your medical is cleared. FAA's incident file is heavily redacted. Officially, you had a minor electrical issue, never diverted, and landed safely in Vegas." "And unofficially?" he asked. Unofficially, she said, you're one of a handful of people on Earth who've seen a runway of gold and lived. And if anything like it ever lights up again, someone will probably call you. He managed a tired smile. Is that a promise or a threat? He asked. She smiled back, just barely. Depends on how much you like sleeping, she said. Weeks later, on a routine night run over a different stretch of desert, Ethan found himself staring down into the dark again. The sky was clear. The gauges were steady. The only lights below were towns and truck stops, and gas flares from lonely facilities. And yet, for a moment, as he passed over an empty patch of nothing in West Texas, his instruments blinked. Just once. Just enough to make his heart skip. On the horizon, far off, a line of lights glimmered. Straight, narrow. He blinked, leaned forward. The line vanished. His radio stayed solid. His GPS never hiccuped again. Probably nothing, he told himself. Storm scatter, ground reflection, nerves. He reached into his flight bag and touched the photocopy he kept folded their single frame from a satellite image. A bright strip in the middle of nowhere. Runway of Gold. Even buried, even broken, the idea of it lingered. Not just as a crime scene, as a warning. In a world where fortunes could disappear into code, and private runways could hide in the cracks between storms and radar sweeps, Ethan knew one thing with absolute clarity. If you ever find yourself in the dark, out of fuel, and something lights up beneath you that isn't on any map, you have to decide what you believe in more. Your instruments, your survival, or the voice in your head that whispers. Some runways save you, some runways own you, and some, like the one he'd landed on that night over Nevada, they are never meant to be found twice. He pushed the thought away, refocused on the horizon, and flew on into the black. Somewhere far below, the desert kept its secrets. For now, as always, follow Enter the Crime for more.